Hey, how's it going guys? Jack and Matt here with the Toasty Bros, and today we're going to be checking out the top 3 GPUs for under $150.
These 3 GPUs have been used in a lot of budget builds on YouTube, and today we want to check them out and let you all know which one is the best one to go with. But before we get into that, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Vite Ramen, some of our favorite ramen out there. Now you might be wondering why as a tech channel we would want to partner with a ramen company. Well, Vite Ramen was founded by twin brothers Tim and Tom. Tim played collegiate Overwatch for UC Davis and didn't have time to make nutritious meals while doing school life and esports, and because of that, Vite Ramen was created. Speaking of nutrition, these things are packed full of protein, all the essential vitamins you need, and enough calories to, well, keep you going, because you know your body needs them calories to survive.
So we have a few of the really good options here. We have pork, we have chicken, and we even have vegan. One thing that we also really love about Vite Ramen, especially in a time like this, is that they really invest into their employees. They do things like no question asked mental health days / sick days, and also they just do livable wages, which is really essential nowadays.
If you want to support this awesome company that just happens to make really awesome ramen noodles, check the link in the description down below and use our discount code on checkout to save a little bit of money. But thanks again to Vite Ramen for sponsoring this video. How I suggest these noodles. We'll go eat them all right now.
Let's go eat them.
All of them. All right guys, so as I mentioned, this video is going to be a top 3 GPU roundup. If you haven't seen our one where we did the top 3 GPUs under 50, hit the eye in the top right corner and check that video out. But these GPUs come in around $100 to $150. Sometimes you can get them cheaper than that if you want to, and they're great for 1080p high settings. Obviously, they're great cards. But yeah, we're gonna be testing it in this system right here, which is our i3-10100 gaming PC. Eye in the top right corner as well. But yeah, we're gonna do some benchmarks in a couple of games. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about these cards and exactly how we got them.
Okay guys, so the first card we have here is a card that we've used so many times. So this is the Sapphire RX 580. This is actually an 8 gig card, which we have not used a ton of times. We usually go with the 4 gig, but this one we snagged on a really good deal on eBay for around $120, working to our knowledge. So honestly, for one of these really good looking Sapphire cards, this is a good deal. Usually you end up getting those MSI armor cards that just look kind of ugly, but you know, hey, they all work the same. So 120 bucks here. Next up, Evga Geforce Gtx 970. So this one here you can usually get for 90 to like 110. So on the little bit of the cheaper side of things, but also a little bit of an older card. And also a thing to note is this card technically has 3.5 gigs of VRAM, which is a little bit weird, but you know, pretty close to a 4 gig card. And the last card we have here is the R9 390. I actually have personal experience with the 380. That was one of my first big purchase graphics card, was the 2 gig model, but this one's a 390, so a little bit of a step up. These are still a little bit more expensive. They're around 100 to 130, so around the same price as a 580. So hopefully it performs similarly to our 580, but this one is also an 8 gig card. So honestly, the 580 and the 390, I expect to see some similar results, but I'm honestly kind of team 580, and I feel like the 580 is gonna be better, but you know, why don't we go ahead and download some games and find out. Just to go over the specs a little bit more of this PC so you guys know what the fixed variable is going to be, is we have a B460 motherboard, Intel i3-10100, which is a 4-core 8-thread, so there should not be any bottleneck with any of these GPUs. 512 gig NVMe drive, 16 gigs of DDR4, and that's pretty much it for the main specs. We have plenty of power to power all of these cards, so really the only thing that's gonna be changing each time is the graphics card. So we're gonna run through some benchmarks that will hopefully have built-in test results so that we don't have to worry about having any mixed variables as far as, you know, getting in different parts of games and everything. So hopefully we'll get some very scientific test results.
Let's do it, 970 first. All right, guys, the first graphics card we're gonna be testing is the GTX 970, and the games we are gonna be testing in this benchmark run is Rainbow Six Siege, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone in like the bot lobby. That one's probably just gonna be like a rough average of the FPS when we're looking at MSI Afterburner. The first 2 tests are gonna actually have min, max, and average for us to compare, so we're gonna go ahead and run Rainbow Six Siege first on very high settings, and using the built-in benchmark, we'll see what we can get. And here we go with the updated benchmark in Rainbow Six Siege. We're looking at getting well over 100 FPS, which is ideal. It's Rainbow Six Siege. I would hope you can do that on very high settings, but yeah, this configuration works really well. As you can tell, the GPU is the bottleneck, being pinged at like 98%. The CPU should be fine for all these graphics cards. So for those asking in the comment section, this is perfectly fine. And the results look pretty solid. So we're gonna let this run through and then we will see what the numbers are. All right, guys, here are the numbers. We have an average FPS of 154, a minimum of 114, and a max of 203. Let's go ahead and test the next game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
Okay guys, so the next game we have testing is Shadow of the Tomb Raider on high settings, 1920 by 1080, once again on the GeForce 970. Oh, I was already in there, right?
You're already in there. Just gotta go right back.
Damn it. All right.
Run benchmark.
Run benchmark. Let's see how she does.
So as you can tell, we're below 60 FPS, which this game is definitely way more demanding than some of the other games we do test, and it's kind of like our AAA test game of choice, but dipping below 50 FPS isn't ideal, so we'll let this continue to run. This is a longer benchmark, but at the end we'll have some numbers to show you. All right, guys, now that the benchmark has completed, you see we have an average of 55 FPS, which is, well, not great, not the 60 FPS we're looking for. Let's see if some of the other GPUs get there after we test Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone. All right, guys, the next game we're going to be testing is Warzone. Now, under graphics, we are using this mixture of normal high settings, which we will keep consistent throughout the rest of the benchmark. So just take a look at this right here. We'll probably go ahead and up this to high just to like max out a little bit more. But here are the settings we're working with. We're going to hit apply. And what we're going to be using is the Battle Royale practice mode, which is less demanding than the main game, but it allows us to stay consistent. We'll drop in the same location, kind of get an idea what kind of frame rate we're getting, and then from there, we'll be able to tell, well, what kind of difference we have between the three GPUs we have here today. So let's go ahead and get into this game and see what kind of performance we can get. Now, of course, with any of these GPUs, you can lower the settings to get a better experience, but we want to keep the results consistent across the board. So we are running on this high setting preset, and right now it looks like this poor 970 is not very happy, but we'll see how it is once we actually land in. All right, we are dropping in at around 70, 80-ish FPS. Once we land in the building, the frame rate will settle down a little bit and we'll see what we're at. But this is on pretty much high settings 1080p, so expect somewhat lower results on this older graphics card. But hey, look, we're over 60 FPS, which is pretty ideal for a budget GPU. Of course, as I mentioned, you could lower the settings, but hey, this isn't too bad right now. All right, as you can see, the results are pretty solid. We are still getting over 60 FPS, which I would say this is probably roughly like 66 to like 68-ish FPS on average. We get over 70 every so often. I expect this to probably be better across the board with the other GPUs, but I mean, this is actually still pretty impressive. So I'm gonna keep running this out real quick, and then we will go ahead and test the next graphics card, which I have a feeling is probably gonna be the R9 390, because I feel like that just makes sense, right? All right, guys, let's go ahead and test that R9 390, shall we? All right, guys, we have the R9 390 installed, and we're going to run the same benchmark on very high settings on Rainbow Six Siege. Let's go ahead and run that benchmark. It's gonna be very interesting to see how this compares to the 970, because we're going from, well, 3.5 gigs of VRAM to 8 gigs of VRAM on a card that is actually older than the 970. So we'll see if we see any instant performance boost. One thing I have to keep in mind, for some reason, MSI Afterburner does not like this GPU because it is not detecting the GPU usage, but trust me, there is a 390 in here and it is most definitely running right now. So we're gonna let this benchmark run all the way through and see what kind of numbers we get. All right, guys, now that the benchmark is done, it looks like we got an average FPS of 151 with a minimum of 107 and a max of 231, which the max FPS is higher than the 970, but the average is a little bit lower. Now, due to the variability of this benchmark, there may be some inconsistencies here, but that's why we have multiple tests, and we're gonna give you all a good idea of how this performs now in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. All right, guys, we are going to be testing Shadow of the Tomb Raider on the same high settings with the R9 390. Let's go ahead and run that benchmark real quick and see if this one does any better than our 970. And while you look at that, we're getting pretty similar numbers, actually a few more frames. Around this point on the last benchmark run, we were getting about 58-ish FPS. We'll see how it goes, but it looks pretty close to the 970. We'll see what the actual numbers are at the very end of the benchmark run, but yeah, we'll let this run and see what we're looking at. Oh wow, we improved. All right, guys, now that the benchmark is done, it looks like we got an average FPS of 64, which is a 9 FPS increase over the 970. I think this probably has to do with the VRAM. I'm starting to see some concern that this graphics card is dying. I have a feeling this R9 390 is on the brink of death, though. So we're gonna go ahead and benchmark another game real quick. All right, guys, the last game we're gonna be testing with the R9 390 is Warzone, and we are running the same settings that we were using before, high settings and a mixture of high, medium, blah, blah, blah. What we're going to do again is go into the practice mode, load into Battle Royale practice, and see what kind of results we are getting. Now, do keep in mind, this is a very rough average because we are just kind of running around the map and there's not a whole lot of consistency going here. That's why we have the results at the beginning, but we'll see a decent idea of what kind of performance we're getting. Now, we did see some artifacting on the end of the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark. Not sure what was up with that. Hopefully this card isn't having any end-of-life concerns, but we're gonna go ahead and keep running with it and see what kind of performance numbers we can get. But hey, I mean, we're getting better averages. On the 970, we're getting closer to about like 60 FPS average. Right now, I'd say the average is closer to 80 on this system, which is very impressive. And as long as this thing stays stable, I mean, it's a pretty decent option to consider. Now, we do have to keep in mind, this thing does run hot. Like, you can just smell the heat coming off of this graphics card, if I'm being totally honest with you. But yeah, it does run pretty toasty, and that is an issue with some of these older cards. They, especially if they've been run for a long time, they might have a shorter lifespan because of all the heat they've been using. But, you know, it's still a good performing card nonetheless. So keep an eye on that. Definitely see seller descriptions if you are looking for this card and see how long it actually has been used before you consider picking one up. All right, guys, running around the game, we're really not seeing any major differences in the FPS. I would say the average is more like 75 to 80. There are some dips down to like 67 here or there, but hey, I mean, we're even hitting 90 at one point in the same area where we're only averaging about 70. So pretty awesome results for the R9 390. Let's go ahead and switch to the RX 580, shall we? All right, guys, now that we have the RX 580 installed, let's go ahead and run the same benchmark in Rainbow Six Siege and see what kind of results we can get. Now, we are expecting this card to be better than the past two that we tested because, well, the RX 580 is still one of the best value cards out there. But hey, we're gonna give it a fair shot here and see what kind of results we can get. And right off the bat, we're getting about 190 to 197 FPS here, over 200. So we're gonna let this benchmark run and see what the averages are at the end and see how close it comes to some of the other ones we've tested today. All right, guys, now that this benchmark is done, well, this 580 kind of smacked the heck out of all the other GPUs in this testing. We got an average FPS of 214, a minimum 165, and a max of 284. Just keep in mind the 970 got an average of 154. So this is definitely a major upgrade, and considering that you're only paying a little bit more money for something like a 588 gig compared to a 970, I think it's definitely a worthwhile upgrade. So let's go ahead and test some other games and see if this domination continues. All right, guys, next up is the RX 580 in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and we are on the same high preset. We're gonna run the benchmark and see what kind of performance we can get. I'm expecting around 80-ish FPS, most likely, around the 70 to 80-ish range, because, well, it did do a lot better than the other GPUs in Rainbow Six Siege, so we'll see what kind of performance we can get. All right, guys, and well, it looks like it's not a whole lot better. It looks like we're at the 70-ish range compared to the other games we tested, which were getting closer to 60 to a little bit below 60. So we're gonna let this benchmark totally run through and see what kind of average we get. All right, guys, we ended up with an average of 72 FPS, which is definitely an increase over the other graphics cards, but not a significant increase compared to Rainbow Six Siege. We'll talk more about that benchmark when we wrap this video up, but we're gonna go ahead and dive into one more thing, and that is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, more specifically Warzone. All right, guys, and last but certainly not least, we're gonna be testing this RX 580 in Warzone. Same graphic settings, we'll go in here real quick, nothing has changed, blah, blah, blah. Gonna go ahead and back up, go into practice modes, Battle Royale practice, queue in, and see what kind of results we're getting. All right, just starting it out right now, guys, the results look a lot better. We're almost into the 100 FPS range as opposed to like the 70 and 80 we were getting before. So this 580 8 gig, man, it can definitely play a majority of games on high settings without any problems whatsoever. And I think this i3 makes a really good pairing for pretty much any of these GPUs, but we're gonna go ahead and drop in and see what kind of frame rate we're getting as we run around. All right, guys, as you can tell, I mean, this is way better. Over 100 FPS at some times, well, most of the time, actually. We're gonna run around and kill some people real quick, but hey, I mean, this is definitely gonna show you that the RX 580 is still an awesome card for 1080p high settings without any problems whatsoever. Again, we're gonna keep running around, try to get some kills, and, oh no, see what kind of results we stay at. Yeah, guys, I'm not seeing any dips in FPS right now. It's pretty rock solid around the 90 to 100 FPS range, maybe dips into the 80s here and there, but hey man, this is very impressive, and this 580 is honestly really surprising me. I was expecting other cards to be kind of close. Do take all this information with a grain of salt because there could be other variables at play, and a lot of different games could give you a lot of different results. But right now, this 588 gig, especially if you can find it around the price point we mentioned, is obviously a no-brainer. Oh my God, am I gonna get killed by a bot? I refuse. Yeah, guys, overall, very impressed with this 580. How about we go ahead and recap all the results and see what we think about it.
Okay guys, so this probably comes as no major surprise. The RX 580 basically beat both of these cards, but keep in mind the RX 580, especially the 8 gig that we actually use in this video, is typically going to be about $20 to $40 more than both of these cards, but we happen to get a really good deal on it at $120.
Now that 20 to like 30 to maybe even $40 difference when you're at the low end tier of cards can give you a lot of performance. So in terms of value for your money, it's definitely worth spending the extra money for an RX 580 compared to these two cards. But these cards on bid sometimes go below $100 regularly. And at that point, if you're doing like a really cheap build, these two cards are still a good option. The 390, I kind of say stray away from a little bit because it runs really hot. There's a chance that you could get one that does not have a lot of life left because it's been running running hot like its entire life basically, and well, that's not good for PC components. So I try to stray away from these unless you can get a really good deal on them, but the 970 at under $100 is still a great option also.
So if you want to buy any of these cards, don't forget to use the links in the description down below. They're affiliate links, they do help us out. Also, you're probably noticing this kind of scuffed t-shirt. So we actually do have some merchandise that we're working on. You guys can't buy this just yet because, well, I don't know if you guys can tell from here, it came out a little bit not like we wanted it to, so we're working on it and we will have some really awesome merch dropping soon, and we're gonna be regularly updating it. So we'll leave links in the description down below and upcoming videos especially, so you guys can pick up some good merch, and also down below where you can pick up some current merch that we know works well. So if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to our other 2 YouTube channels, also our twitch.tv/toastybros. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
We'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye. We didn't use this computer for testing, by the way. It's just, it's just here.